Tutorial 7 on the PicoDice. Today we're going to look at generating almost the exact same code that we had last time, so that it stops on a number for 2 seconds and then goes back into its counting phase. But instead of using a whole bunch of output tools, we're actually going to use a file tool to put the values onto the port or the GPIO. So that means that you don't actually need to use an output tool, and instead we're going to get our 6 numbered values from a lookup table. So let's go back to our last project and we'll see how that's going to work. So tutorial 6. Now in tutorial 6 we used a whole bunch of output tools, and if you remember we used a subtool to call a switch, and that switch then allows it to go on to the next one. Well, actually we changed it a little bit, didn't we? So that it's always going on to the next one, and the switch allows it to pause on 2 seconds. So we're going to keep the subroutine intact for the moment, and we're actually going to use a lookup tool so that we can record all of these values from numbers 1 to 6. Now the lookup tool, if we go to the custom tab, we can see that we can put in lots of different data, but we only need to fill in values 0 to 5, and that's because the lookup tool will actually start everything from 0. So if you actually don't put any code in there, it's going to think that you're not using any data. So you must put the first value of data in position 0 on the custom tab of the lookup tool. So let's have a look at the data. We're going to put in a number 6 for 0 so that the others are easier to understand. We'll see that in a second. But number 6 was generated by turning GP0 high. And GP0 actually gives us this value down here called a literal. And that literal goes into the GPIO. So that's the number we're going to use in the lookup tool, number 49 for value 6. So in position 0, we're going to put the value 49 that represents a number 6 on our display. Going on to number 1, the displayed one, GP2 is actually the literal 4. So we can put in the literal 4 for the number 1. And the number 2 is the literal 1. The number 3 is the literal 5. The number 4 is the literal 33. And the number 5 is the literal 37. Now that we have all of those recorded in our lookup tool, we're just going to annotate that as numbers 1 to 6. Okay, and we can actually delete all of our output tools now, and all but one of our subtools. So as I said, we're going to use a file tool. The file tool is going to take those numbers 1 to 6 and it's going to place it on our GPIO. And we use file, transfer, file to file, click on the tab, and we're actually going to lift the value from the working register, which is a W, because the lookup tool places those numbers that we just inserted there onto the working register. And that's just a little temporary store where things get placed when you need to use them somewhere else. So we're going to use that value from the working register on the GPIO. And so that's going to then work for us to dump those numbers into our display. So we might actually call that into display. Okay, so we actually need another file tool and a counter tool. And the counter tool is going to do what we just said, count. So we're going to count from the initial value of 0 up to 5, and they're the numbers that are actually going to be looked up with our lookup table. So we also need to use a register, and these registers are places where we can store values between 0 and 255, and that's an actual 8-bit number. So we're going to use GPR07 for the moment. We won't bother renaming it. And then what happens is the number will be updated. So every time the switch goes through to the number will actually increment up to the number 5. And then once it goes past 5, it will go back to 0 again. Then we need to place that number with a file-to-file transfer from that file back onto the working register. So we use GPR07, and that's going to prime the lookup tool for us. So we can hook up those that way. And let's move these things around a bit just to make it a bit neater. Horizontal and distribute. Okay, so from the display we can go back to the switch tool. Now, is that going to work for us? Let's have a look. Each time it goes through the switch, if it's not pressed, it will count. The number will then be placed on the working register. The lookup table will return a value of for the display 1 to 6, and then our file tool will put it in the display. Hey, let's annotate some of these things. So this file tool is going to it's going to take the GPR07 to the working register, and the counter is going to count 0 to 5. Okay, so that should be all we need to do. If we program that, we'll have a look. There's our number. So like last time, it's stopping on a random number between 1 and 6. Thanks for watching.